Good afternoon. The first item of business is portfolio questions. I'll try to get as many people in as possible, so please be succinct. And question number 1 on social security and older people. Question number 1, David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what changes it will make to disability assistance and carers allowance to help reduce loneliness and social isolation.
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Disability and carers assistance will help disabled people and carers access life opportunities and reduce barriers to their participation in social activities and relationships. As outlined in our strategy for tackling social isolation, A Connected Scotland, we know that interaction with others is key to reducing the harmful impacts of social isolation and loneliness. That is why the Scottish Government recognises that social security payments are an investment in people's well-being that can financially support people to make these vital connections with others.
David Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. At present, unpaid carers for disabled people travel for free when they're in the company of the person they care for. Crucially, however, the companion element of the concessionary travel scheme does not assist with the solo travel costs of, for example, collecting prescriptions, doing shopping or visiting the cared person in hospital. According to Carers Scotland, a third of Scotland's unpaid carers struggle to make ends meet, and many cut back on leisure and social activities to cope with the costs of caring. Will the Scottish Government detail what work it has done exploring concessionary travel for the carer?
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Well, I can perhaps ask my colleague, the Transport Secretary, who actually has responsibility for the concessionary travel scheme, to get back directly on what's being looked at in that. But I absolutely do recognise the contribution that carers make to our society. That's exactly why the first act of our new agency, Social Security Scotland, was the implementation of the Carers Allowance Supplement, which last year put an extra £442 into the pockets of carers, a recognition of the very, very important role that they do have. But as I say, I'll perhaps get the Transport Secretary to directly write to David Stewart on the particular aspects around concessionary travel.
Question number 2, Alexander Stewart.
Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what formal assessment Social Security Scotland made over the summer of the implementation of Wave 1 and 2 devolved benefits.
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Further assessment of the implementation timetable for the devolved benefits as a result of the introduction of the Scottish Child Payment was undertaken over the summer jointly by officials in Social Security Programme and Social Security Scotland. The outcome of that assessment was provided to the Social Security Committee in a letter on the 4th of October. A copy of that letter is available on the Social Security Committee website. The Scottish Child Payment position paper, available on the Scottish Government website, has also been updated to reflect the most recent assessment and sets out next steps.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. In a ministerial statement back in June, which stated that over the summer, officials will carry out further formal assessments of the challenges and develop a clear plan of how to mitigate in regard to the IT systems, staffing, supply and management and enabling services of the Social Security Scotland. Will the Scottish Government publish and update to Parliament the findings of those 4 areas?
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Well, as I said in my original answer to Alexander Stewart, we published the finding of those assessments on the 4th of October when we said and confirmed that the programme that was set out by my colleague Aileen Campbell was indeed the programme that we would hold to. So that information is already available and was given to the Social Security Committee, as I said in my original answer.
Question number 3, Joan McAlpine.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it supports the Equality Act 2010's single-sex exemptions that allow for women-only spaces and services based on biological sex, when this is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim.
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
The Scottish Government does, of course, support the appropriate use of the single-sex exemptions by service providers. This requires a case-by-case approach to determine what is legitimate and proportionate in any given circumstance. There is a requirement on all of us to be precise in the words that we use in this complex area, and members will want to note that biological sex is not a term used in the Equality Act 2010.
Joan McAlpine.
Thank you. Does the Minister agree that the genuine occupational requirement in the Equality Act 2010, notwithstanding any current practice, allows a rape crisis centre to ensure that its trauma counsellors are biological women so that no female rape survivor is further distressed by encountering a male voice on a helpline or a male body in a shelter when she reaches out for help?
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Well, I can confirm that specific provision in the Equality Act provides for the option to restrict the employment of a person in a specific employment role on the basis of whether or not that person has a particular protected characteristics. Employers can do that where it is a genuine occupational requirement and where applying the requirement is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. My experience is that organisations of the type referred to are run by dedicated and caring staff and volunteers who have become highly skilled in meeting the needs of vulnerable women and girls over many years. I would expect them to appropriately and lawfully act and use whichever of the various provisions in the Act they believe necessary to deliver services in the best interests of the women that they so tirelessly work for.
I have two supplementaries. Elaine Smith, followed by Patrick Harvey. Elaine Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Minister agree that the Equality Act is right to allow competitive sport to be organised on the basis of sex, where physical strength, stamina or physique are major factors in determining success or failure?
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Well, the member quite rightly points to the Equality Act having provisions in sport, and there is nothing that the Scottish Government is doing or considering doing that would suggest any changes to the exemptions that are already in the Equality Act.
Patrick Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to hope that we all agree that careful, case-by-case exemptions, well evidenced and with a legitimate aim, are something that we would all support. But we're also conscious that this debate is being had in the context in which some people, hopefully not in this chamber, simply don't accept the reality of trans people's lives. They don't accept that trans women are women or that trans men are men. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that if we were to listen to those arguments and reach a position where trans men had to use women's spaces, facilities and services, and trans women had to use men's spaces, facilities and services, this would be wrong, discriminatory and unsafe, and that will not happen in Scotland?
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Well, Patrick Harvey quite rightly points out the responsibility that we all have to have this debate in particular in a way that respects everybody's rights, and that's certainly my intention and the Government's intention to do just that. The Equality and Human Rights Commission Statutory Code of Practice for Service Providers, for example, is clear that in respect of a single-sex service, a service provider should treat trans man or a trans woman according to the gender in which they present, unless there are strong reasons to the contrary.
Question number 4, Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to help the increasing number of older people in Inverclyde.
Christina McKelvey.
The Scottish Government supports all older people across Scotland. We published a Fairer Scotland for Older People, a framework for action on the 3rd of April this year, which not only highlights the contribution older people make, but tackles the barriers they face and the negative perceptions and unfounded stereotypes associated with ageing. The framework has the voice and the influence of older people at its heart, and that's the most important part of the framework. It also draws together a range of work being carried out by the Scottish Government for older people across many areas, including, but not limited to, employment, housing, health and social care, financial security, and we will monitor the progress of the framework and produce an annual report in April 2020.
Stuart McMillan.
I thank the Minister for that reply, and the Minister will be aware that over 1 in 5 Inverclyde residents are aged over 65, and year Inverclyde's population is declining, and in addition, over the last 20 years, the 25 to 44 age group in Inverclyde has also declined by over 30%, whilst the over 75s group has increased by over 20%. So what further support can the Scottish Government actually give to Inverclyde Council to attract people of working age to live and work in the area to ensure that our community is sustainable in the coming years, and would the Minister accept a visit to come along to one of our older organisations within Inverclyde?
Christina McKelvey.
I'll deal with the invitation first, Presiding Officer. I'll be absolutely delighted to come along to one of the older organisations, maybe one of the organisations for older people in Inverclyde. But Stuart McMillan is absolutely right. We need to be mindful of the fact that we are an ageing population and we do need to grow our population, not just in Inverclyde but right across the whole of Scotland, and to ensure that we have a sustainable, vibrant community and drive improvements and inclusive growth. That also includes encouraging EU nationals to stay in Scotland, criticising the ending of freedom of movement and control over our own immigration system in Scotland would be helpful. So this government has therefore established a cross-portfolio ministerial population task force to identify and work which is being undertaken to take forward across government to address population decline and intensify our efforts where necessary to deal with the very issues that Stuart McMillan raises in his question.
Question number 5, Ian Gray.
To ask the Scottish Government how many parents will cease to receive the Scottish Child Payment each year for a child who reaches 16 while still in full-time education.
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Around 20,000 families in receipt of the Scottish Child Payment could have a qualifying young person in education or approved training turn 16 each year. Scotland has a range of support for young people which isn't available elsewhere in the UK. For example, we have protected education maintenance allowance, which was abolished in England, and this provides financial support to 16 to 19-year-olds from low-income households who are attending non-advanced learning in school or college or fulfilling a learning agreement with their local authority.
Ian Gray.
Well, in East Lothian, almost 600 young people who might be eligible will turn 16 in 2023. Virtually all of them will still be at school, but their families will lose this support. And another 1,000 East Lothian children could also lose entitlement in 2021 and 2022, simply because they turn 6 years old and the Scottish Government can't get the full scheme in place until 2022. The Government is botching the design and the implementation of this important benefit. My constituents were the first in Scotland to face the full impact of universal credit's volatility and cliff edges. They really don't need any more of the same courtesy of the Scottish Government this time. At the very least, if the Scottish Government gets the data it requires from DWP, will it guarantee payments can continue for 6-year-olds in 2021 and 2022?
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Well, I have to say, Presiding Officer, I think that question really does underlie Ian Gray's absolute lack of understanding about what the Scottish Government is delivering. We have committed to delivering the Scottish Child Payment. We are doing so early. We are delivering the under-60s payments even earlier than that. To deliver a benefit in around 18 months is absolutely unprecedented, not just in Scotland, but in the rest of the UK. We are developing it early because we are replicating the functionality of the Best Start grant. If Mr Gray is suggesting that we should do something more complex than what we can do under the Best Start grant, he is simply ensuring that it wouldn't be possible for us to deliver the Scottish Child Payment in the time frame that we have. So rather than blaming the Scottish Government, who is working within the powers that it has, perhaps we could actually work together to reflect upon the fact that the Scottish Government currently doesn't have the data to allow us to be able to apply this to the over-60s. So why don't we actually work together to actually ask the UK Government to get that data? Now, if that is possible, then we have to look at whether it can be done within the time frame so it doesn't actually have an impact on the disability assistance. So we will work hard to get the data as quickly as possible. I've already done that to the new Secretary of State. I will do so again when I hope to meet her in a couple of weeks' time. But if that is possible, then we have to be frank about whether that can be done in the time frame that we have and whether there's other implications, because I'm sure Mr Gray wouldn't want to see any delay to the disability assistance. So once again, Presiding Officer, I really do think that if the Scottish Labour is genuinely interested in actually eradicating child poverty, they would work with the Scottish Government to ensure that we have the powers here to actually do it properly.
Question number 6, James Kelly.
Deputy Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to alleviate the impact of the 2-child cap on social security payments in Scotland.
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Unlike the UK Government, our social security system does not and will never have a cap on the number of eligible children in a family who can receive support through our new benefits to help low-income families, which includes the 3 Best Start grants, Best Start Foods, the Scottish Child Payment, as well as the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. The Scottish Government will continue to oppose this UK Government policy, including its appalling rate clause. This is another reason why the Scottish Government should have all powers over social security delivered to Scotland.
James Kelly.
The Tory two-child cap is an abhorrent policy restricting payments to families on the birth of a third child and treating those families with total contempt and disrespect. Does the Minister agree with me that the forthcoming general election presents an opportunity with the election of a Labour government to scrap universal credit and put in place a social security system that treats all with dignity and respect?
Shirley-Ann Somerville.
Well, the next UK election and every other UK election after that still raises the threat that the people of Scotland will be subjected to another Tory government, whether it's next time round, the time after that. And quite frankly, presiding officer, that's exactly why we need to have the powers up here in Scotland and to be free from the threat of a Tory government, whether it's at this election or any other election in the future. And we can only do that through independence.
Question number 7, Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps Social Security Scotland has taken to mitigate the risk of fraud.
Shirley-Ann Somerville.
Social Security Scotland has effective fraud prevention measures in place, delivered through robust systems and procedures. These are detailed in our published counter-fraud strategy. Fraud risk assessments are carried out before the implementation of any benefit, with prevention and detection embedded in the system at design stage. The risks Social Security Scotland face will evolve over time and in line with the different types of benefits delivered. Control systems will be continually developed to respond to evolving risks, protecting our benefits from those who intentionally seek to misuse them whilst contributing to an economic, efficient and effective system. Social Security Scotland has effective fraud prevention delivered through robust systems and procedures, and this is detailed in that counter-fraud strategy.
Liam Kerr.
Thank the Minister for that answer, but Audit Scotland seem to take a different view and warned that the agency does not yet have an approach to estimating error and fraud levels for the benefits it delivers and for those it will become responsible for. So, as more complex benefits start to be delivered by Social Security Scotland, surely this becomes a matter of urgency. So when does the Minister expect to have sufficiently addressed the concerns raised by Audit Scotland?
Shirley-Ann Somerville.
Well, I hope to reassure the member that we absolutely do have the systems in place to be able to analyse and detect fraud for the benefits that are there at this moment in time. There has been, and Audit Scotland did not identify or report any loss as a result of not having, for example, any the current regulations in place for that, because the work that is already been undertaken on fraud is absolutely there and is working well. We are developing social security on an incremental basis. Therefore, the benefits that we have at the moment, their requirements are very different to what will be required when we move to Wave 2 for the continuous payments for disability assessment. So just as we move forward with everything else in social security, we will build what is required for the benefits that are available. And I'm absolutely confident, and the agency is absolutely confident, what we have in place is relevant for Wave 1, and what we will have in place for Wave 2 will be absolutely stringent in fraud, in error, and importantly will deliver the benefits that people require and are eligible for throughout Scotland.
Question number 8, Colin Smith.
Thank you, President Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how many carer and disability benefit recipients in the South Scotland region participate in the Social Security Experience Panels.
Shirley-Ann Somerville.
The Social Security Experience Panels involve people with lived experience of the benefits system. 247 current panel members have addresses in the South Scotland region. This is 11% of current panel members, which compares to 12.5% of the Scottish population as a whole who live in the South of Scotland region. Recruitment is currently open to new panel members, and I would encourage anyone with relevant experience in the South of Scotland, or indeed anywhere else in the country, to take up this opportunity to shape a social security system based on dignity, fairness and respect.
Can I have a short supplementary response, please, Colin Smith?
Recess, the Cabinet Secretary told the Social Security Committee that experience panels had not been consulted on the Government's plan to use CPI for annual uprating. That CPI is set at 1.7% less than the rise in wages, which are twice the rate of inflation. So can the Cabinet Secretary say if the experience panels vital to the co-production approach Parliament debated on Tuesday have been asked if they think those uprating proposals are fair?
Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Well, we did carry out absolutely consultation on the uprating procedure. The conclusion that came to, as I discussed with the Social Security Committee, is that we have used and will continue to use the most relevant and the most up-to-date measure of inflation as experts and as the Bank of England, for example, suggest that any organisation uses. That's why we will continue to use the most useful national statistics. That's what we've done this year.
That concludes portfolio questions on social security and older people. Before I move on, can I remind members that it is a courtesy to the Chamber, if one has a question within a portfolio slot, to be there for the entirety of that portfolio slot. Thank you. And we'll move on to the next item of business. If people would shift themselves around speedily, please.